And hello. Welcome to Nursing News You Can Use at 5. I'm Tina Baxter, your host, and welcome to those of you that are on our Facebook pages, the Nurse Shark Academy and Baxter Professional Services, and those that are watching on our YouTube channel. We have a brand new introduction to our show, and I thought it'd be great to debut it there for you, our new introduction. And so I'm very excited to have that for you. So let me know what you think. Let's go ahead and get into our affirmation. And so I was thinking about our affirmations for today, and we're doing a new series on our blog and on the Nurse Shark Academy. And I thought I'd just use those as one of our affirmations for a while. So I just thought that would be great to talk about. And so our new blog just went out on today, actually, this morning. It's the power of our be attitudes. And so our latest blog was on Be Calm, but today's blog was on Be Tenacious. And so I'm continuing that series on the power of your Be attitude that we're going to talk about being tenacious. So this is a quote from Albert Einstein, and he says, "It's not that I'm so smart, it's just that I stay with problems longer." And so, my question to you is, how tenacious are you? Do you keep going? Do you keep trying? Do you keep looking to see if you can make a difference? Ella Wheeler Wilcox once said, "No difficulty can discourage, no obstacle dismay, no trouble disheartens the man who has acquired the art of being alive. Difficulties are but dares of fate, obstacles but hurdles to try his skill, troubles but bitter tonics to give him strength, and he rises higher and looms greater after each encounter with adversity." So if you want to see the full blog post, head on over to the nursesharkacademy.biz to our blog, and you can certainly see that there. All right, so that's our affirmation for today. Be tenacious and keep going. So let's go ahead and get into the news because there is some news to cover. And our first story is coming from right here in good old Indiana. And this is a story that was published in the Capital News. And it says Indiana has a problem, a lack of nurses, and lawmakers are trying to help. Amidst the nursing shortage, legislatures look to reduce licensing and training barriers. Indiana doesn't have enough nurses to meet growing demands, with thousands of openings across the healthcare industry. By the end of the decade, an estimated 1 in 4 Hoosiers will be of retirement age or older, a population that has more health needs and more complicated care. Estimates predict that Indiana would need an additional 5,000 nurses by 2031, equal to graduating an additional 1,300 nurses each year until that time, according to the Indiana Hospital Association. So this isn't something that is unique to Indiana. This has been going on across the country. And so other states are looking at bills. There's certainly several, and Nebraska is one of them, has a new bill coming out. And so there's debate on their nursing shortage or basically how to get more nurses into the field. And so let's get into it. So it says a nationwide nursing shortage has spurred states to take action, with some investing $125 million to lure students to the profession, and other states providing a living allowance alongside child care benefits. Well, you know what? That might be interesting. Let's do that in Indiana. That might help some people that I know that really had issues with childcare as she was going to nursing school. In Indiana, those types of add-ons are still in the hands of employers, and legislator attention remains fixed on widening the pipeline of students and adding licensing flexibilities. Building upon the passage of the 2022 nursing bill, House Bill 1259 seeks to continue expanding the nursing workforce by addressing foreign educated nursing licensure requirements and on-the-ground training. And so I have to say that again, that doesn't really, if you're looking at it from a global perspective, that does not help the nursing shortage worldwide, because when you import nurses from other countries, and I'm not saying that they shouldn't do this, but I think that it's important for us to be cognizant of this. We've had criticism from larger global organizations, that we're siphoning the talent away from those countries that are most vulnerable, third world countries that cannot afford to replace them. And so it's a difficult thing. Certainly, we need the nurses here, but they need nurses back home too. So, according to Representative Brad Barrett, who's the author of the bill, he says we changed the policy a couple years ago, and then we found that those bottlenecks still existed. I think it's great legislatively to put something in place, watch it in action, identify a couple of bottlenecks, and then address those. House Bill 1259 was just following up on this real intent to increase the nursing workforce. So, here are some of the details about this bill. While most of the bill received glowing support and testimony, one issue was a bit of a sticking point for nurses working in clinical settings: language striking minimums for preceptors or licensed nurses supervising students during rotation. Previously, preceptors needed 18 months of experience before they could be drafted to teach and mentor the next generation. The new law has no minimum requirement. So basically, what you would end up having is a nurse that maybe has been on the job for 3 months is able to then precept and train a brand new nurse coming out of school, or a nurse new to this area. So that may be a problem because that nurse wouldn't had enough experience. There is certain enough nursing research to know that nurses need a time for them to get experience on the floor and working before they can be considered an expert in their field. It's that whole novice to expert, us nurses know better. And so again, I think that probably is misinformed. And most likely, when you're starting a new job, it's going to take you 6 months to a year minimum for you to feel comfortable in that job. So I don't think that's fair that they could potentially put a brand new nurse in that position. Representative Cindy Ledbetter, a nurse practitioner with a doctorate, cautioned against the move, saying unprepared nurses would be given to students to address a shortage. She says, my concern is that you have a brand new nurse with the hospital requiring them to precept them, and they're not ready to translate what they've learned in the classroom themselves into real world scenarios. She says, I'm concerned that we're going to lose more nurses on the other end. And I think that is a legitimate concern. Barrett said it's in the hospitals and other employees' best interest to identify and assign good preceptors, not just anyone with 18 months of experience. And that is another problem because we have this phenomenon that we've talked about in nursing of nurses eating their young, which is a term I really hate. But we've had this phenomenon. And so not everybody is cut out to be a preceptor. I've done my fair share of precepting, and I don't mind precepting in certain conditions, situations. I've certainly loved having students when I was in the nursing home and seeing patients there. And that practice, it was very conducive for me to have someone in the room with me. And so it's important that we have nurses that are comfortable being preceptors. And not everyone's a good teacher, and you shouldn't be forced to do it if you're really not good at it. I mean, there are some nurses that I worked with over the years that I would cringe if they were put in that position because they just aren't good under pressure, and that kind of pressure. That's what I mean. Or they just lack the personal skills to be able to do it. And not everybody wants to do it. According to Barrett, he says, does a period of time served automatically qualify to be a good preceptor? I think quite the contrary. I think preceptors should be chosen by merit and not by time. I think it opens up the field. You can be in any profession for 5 years and not be a good preceptor. You can be in the game for 6 months and be a wonderful preceptor. I think, and I get what he's saying, but I honestly do not think that you can be a nurse for 6 months and be a good preceptor. You are still learning your craft at 6 months. At 6 months, I would not feel comfortable being a preceptor. So I think for him to make that statement is not understanding the nature of the role of what nurses do. And I just don't think that's an informed decision that he can make. And I'm talking to you, Representative Barrett, okay? Maybe if you would spend some time precepting and following a nurse, maybe you would understand a little bit better. And that is my suggestion to you. So it says, on the other hand, foreign born nurses may help ease the shortages for some healthcare providers, but recruitment can be lengthy and expensive, especially under a federal visa regression that delays processing and limits applications. State barriers include requiring an English proficiency exam, even when an interview and clinical examinations determine fluency, and using CGFNS International Inc. as the sole entity to review visas when other states rely on multiple credentialing organizations. The language on foreign educated nurses has already been approved by the Senate in a separate omnibus health care bill. Mark S. Upano, a registered nurse and president of the Philippine Nurses Association of Indiana, said CGFNS reported that 60.8% of their nearly 27,000 visa screenings are Filipino. She testified in support of both the Senate and House bills addressing foreign educated nurses. States, we really need to streamline the licensure requirements for foreign educated nurses. Right now, we have a critical shortage. We have to compete with 50 other states to recruit nurses to Indiana. If we have them come in sooner, then we would be in a better position to ease the shortage and have qualified nurses who will deliver safe care to our Hoosiers. I certainly do want to support foreign-born nurses being able to come here and practice and maybe immigrate to this country and live here and do so safely and legally and all those things. I think that's fine. We've done it with doctors. We've done it with nurses. I think that's fine. What I do want to, again, say is that my only concern here is that, hopefully that we aren't siphoning off the talent from one country and leaving them impoverished. And so I think on an individual basis, if that nurse wants to take that opportunity, congratulations to that nurse, and she or he should be well able to do so. But I don't think that that's going to solve all of our problems. So there's more into this story we don't have time to get into, but I'm going to ask that you continue to look at this. Also, there's another bill that I want to discuss, and that's the continuing education bill for nurses that has been up, and we do need to talk about that. That is Senate Bill 45. So it appears to incorporate trauma-informed training into nursing education. Author Senator Mike Crider passionately described how trauma-informed training has transformed his investigative approach during his law enforcement career and how he wanted other professions to have the same knowledge. But unlike the majority of states, Indiana doesn't have any continuing education requirements for nurses. Under Crider's original bill, nurses would have to recertify every 2 years, but the state's professional licensing agency doesn't track continuing education for nurses like it does for doctors or other healthcare professions. Nurse employers do that work. So again, that becomes an issue. Certainly, if you are a nurse and you have a certification, you have to have your continuing education to maintain your certification. If you're a nurse practitioner, there are certain things that you have to do as an advanced practice nurse. But as a registered nurse or licensed practical nurse, you do not have to have continuing education. And that has been a subject that has been debated for several years in the state of Indiana. So it says, following pushback, senators amended the bill to say every nurse must certify within 5 years, and there shall be a study about incorporating it into secondary education institutional curriculum. Again, my question is, how are you going to track this? So Katie Feely, the chief executive director of the Indiana State Nurses Association, said most of Indiana's schools already have trauma-informed training in their curriculum. Her organization opposed the legislation, saying that PLA already struggles to meet its current workload, which has certainly been true because there have been issues for people getting slow if you're moving to the state and wanting to get licensed. And so there are things that have happened, as in other states. And so Feely says employers do require most of the time annual training, if not biannual training. Some of our members have shared that they do receive this training from their employer. If the nurse is practicing and employed, he or she should receive it through their employer. And I will have to say that as a nurse practitioner and as an employee in mental health, I have certainly had to participate in this training. In fact, quite recently. And so I think I understand his intentions with this. I just don't know if it's going to passed because of tradition of no continuing education requirement in the state of Indiana. So we'll see. We'll keep an eye on that bill. All right, let's move to our next story. And so here we go. This is a story out of Yahoo Finance. I thought this was kind of interesting. Because I just saw a post from someone on LinkedIn advocating nurses getting involved in the tech field and for tech companies to hire more nurses. And then I happened upon this article. Hippocratic AI launches Nurse Advisory Council to help guide development of safety-focused healthcare LLM. So this is coming out of Palo Alto, California. Hippocratic AI today announced the launch of its Nurse Advisory Council, comprised of registered nurses from leading healthcare systems and digital healthcare enterprises. The Nurse Advisory Council, alongside Hippocratic AI's Physician Advisory Council, will help shape the company's safety-focused large language model, or LLM, for healthcare and ensure that it's ready for deployment. Staffing shortages have been a substantial problem for the healthcare industry. The World Health Organization projects a global shortfall of 10 million healthcare workers by 2030, but patients and providers are already feeling the effects. Research overwhelmingly shows an association between nurse staffing ratios and patient safety. As the number of patients per nurse increases, so do patient morbidity and mortality. But the rapid advancement of generative AI promises a new paradigm, one in which nurses are supported by safe and effective technology and can wholeheartedly devote themselves to high-impact patient care. So Michelle Vossard, who is the Director of Care Manager at Hippocratic AI, says, as a nurse myself, I see firsthand how the gaps in our workforce are negatively affecting not only patients, but also our own well-being. I joined the Hippocratic AI team because I believe in generative AI's potential to make our work infinitely scalable and ensure that patients receive the highest quality care possible. It's a privilege to work with the distinguished members of Hippocratic AI's Nurse Advisory Council to build a solution that will truly help us help others. Led by Michelle Vossard, Hippocratic AI's Director of Care Management, and Sophia Fusaka, Hippocratic AI's Director of Nursing, the council includes the following 10 initial members and will expand over time: Erica Bentley, Serena Bumpus, Shauna Butler, Cassie Chow, Kenneth Dion, David Marshall, Anthony McCarthy, Molly McCarthy, Colleen Morley, and Patricia Railsback Mason. And so I just wanted to share that information with you. So if you want more information about this article, I'll be happy to post this in the show notes. But you can also look at the press release by Hippocratic AI, and you want more information, you can go to hippocraticai.com. All right, let's move on. This is something that always is hard to report on, but I wanted to make sure that we talk about it because I think it's important that we continue to report these incidents when they happen, because I think people get lax with their safety measures, and this is important. So this is from Metro News, the voice of West Virginia, and it says multiple staff members assaulted at Martinsburg nursing home, man charged. A homeless man is under arrest after he reportedly assaulted multiple staff members and ransacked workstations as well as other areas of a nursing home in Martinsburg. The Berkeley County Sheriff's Department says James Buford Cressel, 52, of no fixed address, was taken into custody after a brief struggle. Deputies were called to the Martinsburg Health Care Center after 9 o'clock last Thursday, February the 8th. Cressel had reportedly gained unlawful entry into the building and was actively throwing tables and breaking into offices. A report of the incident indicates workers were attempting to keep patients safe, but multiple staff members had already been assaulted. As deputies arrived on the scene, Cressel was allegedly attempting to break out of a locked door in the front entrance. He was taken into custody after a brief struggle, according to the Sheriff's Department report. Crossland committed violent acts to multiple staff, according to Sheriff's Office spokesman Eric Burnett. One victim has been transported to the hospital for treatment. Kressel was reportedly lodged in the Eastern Regional Jail. Burnett reports Kressel also had outstanding warrants through the West Virginia State Police for arrest for previous unrelated incidents. I say this and share this. First of all, my thoughts go out to the family and the staff members that were assaulted in this. But I say, again, lax security protocols in healthcare centers will continue to lead to these type of incidents happening. This is a man that came into a facility that he was not supposed to be there, started breaking into things, assaulting staff members, and it's because we have lax security measures. Okay. So this is another local story, not to us, but a story in the United States, and this is coming out of Florida. And this is at a St. Johns County parents speak out against school nurse reduction at board meeting. So this was at a school nurse meeting. And so this is why it's important that as nurses, we be involved in our local political scene, whether we show up to school board meetings, we show up to our city council meetings, our state meetings, whatever. We need to make sure that our voices are heard because issues like this does come up. So it says several parents of St. John's County Public Schools students voiced concerns about the district's plan to reduce the number of nurses at each school at a board meeting Tuesday night. Dozens of nurses showed up wearing scrubs and a show of solidarity. Former SJC school nurse Holly Farmer told board members these healthcare workers already have too much on their plate and that only having one at each school could be putting students at risk. She resigned from her role at the end of the last school year. She says to ask for more with less is frightening. She said the ratio of nurses to students within the district is already unacceptable. The tasks that are being put upon our school nurses are insurmountable, and it's scary. It's putting not only our nursing license at risk, but the health and safety of these kids. Many parents found out in January about the district's plan to go from having 2 nurses to only 1 at each school. Krista White's son is a kindergartner with type 1 diabetes. She said she's in contact with his school nurse several times a day, and she's worried about what could happen if he has an emergency medical episode if there's only 1 nurse for the entire school. Farmer says he has to be monitored really around the clock for his blood sugar. He's 5 years old. He has no independence of care whatsoever, so he depends on adult nurses to monitor and make sure that he's safe and healthy at school. So White is not the only mother who is uncomfortable with the cutbacks, according to this article. Another parent said to hear these cuts is highly upsetting. After public comment, Superintendent Tim Forson responded, saying the cuts are necessary because of the loss of additional COVID funding. He says, I think it's just an absolute shame that it has to happen, but I do believe it is where we will go and where I'll continue to recommend us to go forward. The change will be in effect at the start of the next school year. So again, unfortunately, school nursing is one that they put on the chopping block because they just don't see the benefit of it. I'm sure, yeah, it's great to have more nurses, but then when the rubber meets the road, and I have to say, school nurses are notoriously underpaid. So now you're putting more on one nurse to be everywhere. What happens if that child blood sugar goes down drastically and it starts to have a seizure while you have another child that has to have his anti-seizure medicine because he's prone to seizures and he has to have it on a scheduled time? I mean, there's no thinking. Or what happens if someone actually falls or needs CPR or gets electrocuted? I mean, anything could happen, and you have one nurse to take care of all of these students. I think that it's just short-sighted. And may I point out that when he say that, oh well, we didn't have the money because we were out of money from COVID. You didn't have COVID money prior to that. And so I think that places really need to be more creative than always looking at nursing to be your expense sheet that you can just strike off, because again it affects a lot of the students there, and there's a big safety issue. And I don't think that it should be one person, in the building. And then for some school districts, unfortunately, they don't even have a nurse full time in the building. A nurse may cover several buildings. So this is a big problem. So just an update on the St. Vincent. This is again in Massachusetts, not Indiana, but the St. Vincent nursing strike. It says, disappointing. St. Vincent declines meeting nurses on staffing concerns, saying nurses are spreading false rumors. So let's talk about this. Okay. So this is from the Worcester Telegram and Gazette. Nurses at St. Vincent Hospital delivered a petition Wednesday morning to hospital leadership to demand that they fix problems, including a severe shortage in staff that nurses claim endanger patient lives. The hospital calls the accusations, quote, unfounded. Meanwhile, the State Department of Public Health is conducting an on-site investigation at the hospital, according to department officials. The investigation started January the 31st, and the agency declined to comment, citing ongoing investigation. It was sparked by complaints received from the Massachusetts Nurses Association about the level of care provided at the hospital. On another front, the Joint Commission visited nurses in the hospital's emergency room Wednesday, according to Marlena Pellegrino, a registered nurse at St. Vincent's for the past 37 years. She's also co-chair for the Massachusetts Nurses Association bargaining unit that represents nurses at the hospital. The Joint Commission accredits psychiatric hospitals in Massachusetts, and a call and email to the commission for comment was not immediately returned. St. Vincent's has a 12-bed inpatient psychiatric unit. St. Vincent is owned by for-profit Tenet Healthcare based in Dallas. Tenet reported a gross profit of $15.9 billion in 2022, with an operating income of $2.5 billion in the same year, according to online reports. Tenet owns Metro West Medical Center in Framingham, where nurses voted last month to unionize. That vote followed allegations of union busting by Tenet. Meanwhile, Metro West Medical Center officials told the Framingham City Council last month that it experienced severe financial problems operating in the red for the past 36 months. Hospital leadership declined to meet with a handful of nurses that delivered the petition signed by 500 nurses at the hospital, said Pellegrino. The hospital's chief labor relations officer told the group that the chief nursing officer, Denise Cavpill, didn't have time to meet with them. Pellegrino says, we find this disappointing and not surprising because they've refused at every turn to meet with us. Nurses claim the hospital is breaking nurse-patient ratios agreed upon in a contract that ended the longest nurses' strike in state history. That agreement was reached 2 years ago after St. Vincent's nurses walked out for more than 300 days, and we covered that. Man, that was 2 years ago? Wow, we covered that story, and you could go back to 2022 if you want to and check our archives to hear about that. But I was like, wow, that was 2022? Crazy. Seemed like it was just yesterday. All right, let's go on. So the contract calls for one nurse for every 4 or 5 patients, depending on the unit and how many patients are admitted to the unit. However, the ratios are exceeding those numbers because of staff shortages, threatening the safety of patients, according to Pellegrino. Exacerbating the problems of Pellegrino is the lack of any resource nurse on the medical surgical floors. Those nurses run the units and take no more than 2 patients, so the rest of the nurses on the floor should have no more than 4 or 5 patients. The danger, said Pellegrino, is with no resource nurses, other nurses are taking on more patients than they can handle. That, nurses argue, is dangerous for patients. So, of course, St. Vincent's has sent in a prepared statement that the contract terms that broke the prolonged strike and opposes the association's publicity stunts, as they call it, and spreading false rumors. Well, you know what? We can get that because we can pull the staffing records, pull time cards. Do you want to know? Go after the time cards. Anyway, so it says St. Vincent Hospital remains focused on providing high quality care as well as regionally and nationally recognized healthcare services for our community. We respect our contract with the Massachusetts Nurses Association and continue to operate in accordance with provisions that were mutually agreed upon in the collective bargaining agreement. We take employee complaints seriously. However, the MNA's accusations are unfounded. We do not condone the MNA's tactics of organizing publicity stunts, spreading false rumors, and intimidating our leadership. The MNA's actions are disrespectful to the dedicated nurses, physicians, and staff at St. Vincent Hospital who prioritize caring for our patients. We hope the MNA will reconsider its approach and instead collaborate with us and other systems facing similar staffing shortages to increase healthcare access for the communities we serve. So Pellegrino says another strike is out of question at the time because of the current contract runs until 2025. They said that's not something we want to even think about now. If we don't start now taking care of patients, I don't know what the end game will be for this hospital. So we will see and continue to follow that story. This was reported in the GardnerNews.com, so you can head over there if you want to get into more of the details and follow the story. But yeah. And this is another story that I happened to find about a new study from the University of Michigan, and this just came out from WHMI.com. This is a new study from the University of Michigan Nursing reports significant burnout among nurses in the state. Yep, I'm pretty sure it's elsewhere as well, but let's move on. It says 94% of Michigan nurses, let's go back. 94%. 94% of Michigan nurses report emotional exhaustion, with younger nurses significantly more likely to report burnout than colleagues over 45. Christopher Fries of University of Michigan professor of nursing and public health says he's been studying nurse burnout for 20 years, and these are among the highest numbers he's seen. Well, 96%, yeah. The study examined 3 outcomes among nurses: emotional exhaustion, a key component of burnout, thoughts of self-harm, and overall wellness, and identified interventions. Lead author Marita Titler, University Professor Emerita of Nursing, says findings from this study are a call to action to generate evidence-based system-level intervention to promote nurses' health, address emotional exhaustion, and promote the well-being of the nursing workforce. The data was collected from the Michigan Nurses Survey in 2022. Among its findings, inadequate staffing, lower psychological safety in the workplace, and younger age were associated with emotional exhaustion. Physical abuse in the workplace was associated with thoughts of self-harm. Employer support, favorable practical environments, higher job satisfaction, and positive coping strategies were associated with higher wellness scores. When nurses reported their workplace staffing and resources were adequate, they were 18% less likely to be burnt out. About 10% of nurses reported thoughts of self-harm. Nurses who engaged in hobbies and spent time with family and friends had better outcomes, whereas those who slept more or watched TV did not, because oftentimes if you're just watching TV and you're sleeping, you're sometimes, as a person who works in mental health, it's not really a restorative activity, it's more of an escapist activity, and so that's not really restoring you. The youngest nurses had the highest rates of burnout and thoughts of self-harm and the poorest overall well-being. And again, a lot of this is probably because they, one, don't have the experience. So it's really high stressful as you're learning your role. 2, you may not have the reserves. And so for those of us who've been in for nursing for a while, know that a lot of this stuff is cyclical. It certainly is worse than it's ever been, but it's cyclical, and may have more opportunity to grow and have built up a resilience where as a brand new nurse, they may not have done that. And the study supports findings from a study last year that found that more than half of nurses 35 and younger plan to leave their jobs. Can I just say, plan to leave their jobs? And again, I am a big proponent of, hey, you don't like your job, leave your job, but you don't have to leave your nursing profession. There is something else that you could do as a nurse. You don't have to put all that time, money, expense into your profession and then walk away from it. There is something different that you can do. And I think that for a lot of the younger nurses, they're just not willing to put up with a lot of what us older nurses have done traditionally. And I think back to some of the things that I did in my nursing career that I might have done differently had I been more mature, and where I am now. There's things that, I would not have put up with that, was expected to me of me as a brand new nurse, being a brand new nurse right off of orientation and instantly charged nurse on the next shift. I was in orientation as a brand new grad the shift before. Didn't leave the building, just went up to the next floor and became charge nurse. Yes, that happened. And so Freeze says for burnout and overall well being, the drivers were workplace, not personal characteristics. To me, this suggests that younger nurses do not perceive their workplace as supportive as they could. Employers likely need to adopt different strategies to support younger nurses as they appear less likely to accept poor working conditions, which goes back to us. I'm like, so we're just, us old timers, I guess we just accepted it. But I think that the conversation is moving forward and we're not as willing to accept those things as we were in the past. And that's what they're seeing. So, Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer recently signed legislation that mandated higher fines for violence against healthcare workers. So, that will be great. Michigan's also considering staffing legislation for nurses this year. So, we'll see what happens, and passing limits on overtime and other working condition improvements. And so, I do want to say that again with those. This study, if you're a nurse and you're listening to this and you are experiencing burnout or you're having self-harm thoughts, please reach out. You can dial 988 or 1-800-273-8255 to get to the National Suicide Prevention and Crisis Lifeline. I do want to bring that up as well. So I always like to provide that resource. And if, talk to a friend, a pastor, someone that you trust. Please reach out to someone. All right, and here is our last story of the evening. And I just wanted to share this. I thought this was great. It says, local home health nurse marks 50 years in nursing. This is coming out of Pennsylvania. And it says, nursing has changed a great deal in the last 50 years, just as Nancy Farwell, RN, who is employed by Penn Highlands Healthcare at home in performance improvement. Nancy began her professional nursing career in 1973 when she was fresh out of nursing school at Dubois Hospital. Upon graduation as a registered nurse, she joined the hospital staff on the medical surgical floor. She says, back then, all the nurses were female. Each of us was assigned to 6 or 7 patients, of which we were responsible for their care for the day. The floor nurses not only provided post-surgery procedural care, prep for tests, surgery, and therapy, treatments, feeding, and bathing, but we also transported patients to tests and to their cars for discharge, along with cleaning the room so they were ready for the next patients. Nancy also said that everything has changed significantly over the years, from the nursing uniforms to the delivery and packaging of medications to the length of stay. She said back in the 1970s and 80s, we wore white dresses and caps, not even slacks. Medications came to the floor for patients in loose bottles. They were not individually wrapped as they are today, which is true because I do remember having stock medications, and this was back in the 90s. We still had floor stock medications that came in big bottles. Post-op patients for any surgery were guaranteed a 6 to 7 day hospital stay, while today people can have surgery and go home the same day. Nancy transitioned to home health nursing in the 1980s and soon discovered that it was her favorite type of nursing. She says, back when I started in home health, it was a new form of nursing care available to patients. We saw a lot of our patients 3 times a week for 9 weeks. Our patients were assigned to us according to our home location if possible. For patients who needed authorizations from the insurance companies for the visits, the nurses were required to obtain the authorizations. One of the most significant changes that Nancy has experienced as a home health nurse was the use of a cell phone. And I do remember not having a cell phone we had beepers, and we would ask the patient's family, may I use your phone to make a phone call? And here's what she says. At first, we were issued beepers, and the on-call services would beep us if they have a message for us. Patients were also given our home phone numbers if they needed to reach us. Many times when I was out with a patient, other patients would call my home, and my husband would take messages until I returned home. We eventually received cell phones, but reception was never good, so patients continued to call my home. Nancy very eloquently summed up her decades in nursing. She says, while nursing has changed in the past 50 years, caring for patients has not. Nursing is the hardest job I have ever done, but one of the greatest satisfactions of my life. And Nancy, you are our nurse making a difference this week. All right, that concludes all of our news for today. I want to thank you for tuning in to our nursing news you can use at 5. And please let me know what you think about our new introduction. And there's going to be some more changes that are coming to our show to make our time more efficient and productive for you. So with that said, I'm going to end this with just a reminder about what's happening at the Nurse Shark Academy. Frustrated? Looking for something new? Are you looking for more? Nurses, are you ready to feel the sun? You will dream big and expand your consciousness as an entrepreneur. Your nursing license is your key to freedom. Join the Nurse Shark Academy at the nursesharkacademy.biz today. And I want to say thank you for joining us. And don't forget to sign up at the nursesharkacademy.biz. Please go ahead and register for our newsletter so you can get notification of when our content comes out. Also, if you want to follow us on the Nurse Shark Academy on our YouTube channel, please like and subscribe as well and ring that notification bell so you know when we go live every week. And for our other show, the Nurse Shark Academy Show, where we interview and highlight nurse business owners. This has been all that I have for you today, and I want to thank you for following us, and have a great rest of your evening.